Checking. No, not yet.
Okay, let me text her. There's one guest. Mr. Morgan, are we live?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is the December 2024 Board of Directors meeting for Estero Public Schools. At this time, to quantify or to signify quorum, we'll call upon Mr. Kett, our Executive Director, to record attendance and guests.
Chairman Bullock,
Present.
Vice Chair Newbern, I believe she is logging in remote today as per the agenda. Secretary Wheat is on property, just stepped right outside of the room. Ms. Alvarado. Present. Ms. Boomcab is absent. That does constitute a quorum. Ms. Horan. Present. Mr. Griffin.
Present.
Ms. Hammond. Present. Mr. Morgan.
Present.
Thank you.
All right. With that quorum being established, I'll call the meeting to order. And at this time, first item is to approve the board minutes from our November 2024 meeting, and I will entertain a motion from a board member to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Properly moved. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we welcome our member, Mr. Johnson. Now we'll move to public comments. Mr. Morgan, are there any guests who have signed up for public comment?
No public comment signups at this time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Morgan. We'll move on in our agenda to the financials, and we'll call upon Mr. Griffin from XA.
I need to go to the link, right?
Yeah.
Forgive me just a moment as I
No problem.
share my screen.
It's in your calendar. Mr. Bullock, why Mr. Griffin is logging in, would you like to do the academic spotlight?
That'd be great.
Okay.
The firm of H&H.
Recording in progress.
Ms. Hannon and Ms. Moran.
Oh, okay, so today's academic spotlight, academic strategy spotlight is focusing on TWIG, which was our new curriculum adoption. There was a science task force last year. And after looking at many different curricular options, we decided upon TWIG. Based on our data, we also embedded a literacy focus, like we've been talking about this year or earlier at previous board meetings. So when we look at TWIG, part of the reason that it was chosen is each module is built around an anchor phenomena where students investigate a problem. It's very hands-on, where students are researching and answering questions, and they're thinking critically about the phenomena throughout the entire module. It's a great digital platform, so everything is embedded online. And students have access to high quality texts and learning resources, including students K-5 have little mini booklets that align with each unit of study with different rating levels so that they can use that to continue to guide their learning outside of just the science block. So in terms of teacher professional development and implementation, there was an initial PD that was differentiated for middle school and elementary in August during pre-service. And then on August 30th at our release day, where students had a pupil-free day, we learned about reading strategies using science texts as the hands-on activity for teachers for engaging all students in active reading, and how through collaboration, struggling readers can access the text together with their peers. In January, Ms. Diamar is going to be presenting, our intern principal at EPS2 is going to be presenting on TWIG leveled readers and how to use them in the classroom as one of our PD options. In February, we have our TWIG learning walk happening where we'll go around together and observe TWIG implementation between all of the classrooms. And then in April, we have our last TWIG PD, and that'll be based on teacher input in terms of where they would like support and development within TWIG. All throughout this, we're really working on connecting TWIG and literacy together, so that literacy across content areas. Here's one of our students at Bree doing an activity where they were comparing two objects in terms of the physical differences between the two, texture, etc. And then here at the top left corner, we have students diving into a text about the water cycle, and they're looking at different graphs online and annotating the text as they read about it. And then we have students doing an experiment with plants and with seeds in our 5th grade classroom. And they did an experiment where they used different controls to see how it impacted plant growth. So in alignment with our mission and vision, with a focus on the natural world and interconnectedness of all things, TWIG is a very strong connection for us with our mission and our vision. So I just wanted to take the opportunity today to talk about, I know that you all approved TWIG last spring, and here's how it's been implemented and how it's going. So thank you.
Great. Questions from the board? Thank you. All right. Are we ready to? Are you ready, Ms. Bruce?
Okay. So for today, we have the November financials for the board's consideration. Looking at enrollment first, I'm going over the enrollment through month 3. And through month 3, we had enrollment of 349 collectively across the 2 schools at an average daily attendance rate of 94.4%, which is on track with our revised budgeted ADA. One thing to point out regarding enrollment is as of the time month 3 closed, EPS 1 had 6 less students than the revised budget, whereas EPS 2 had 2 more students than the revised budget. Looking at the income statement, the biggest revenue variance of note has to do with 56,000 less LCFF funding due to that lower enrollment at EPS 1. And on the operating expenditure side, when we revised the budget, we revised it with the understanding that our facility project was going to continue as planned. However, after that, different information became available and we had to write off the cost of that project in its entirety, which is why we have a $2.5 million overrun in our operating expenditures there. So as it stands, our net loss for the year is projected to be $2.47 million. But one of the keynotes that I have, and I'll continue to include, is that independent of those write-off expenditures, our operating net income for this year would be $128,000. Okay. Looking at the balance sheet, we had ended the month of November with $6.2 million, and we're projecting year-end cash of $6.8 million. Within this packet, I also have the dashboards for the individual schools as well as the home office that roll up into our summary. A consolidated income statement, balance sheet, and check register. And we always include our check register for review at the board level. If anyone has a question around any of the disbursements For the month of November, you may ask now, you can ask after the fact if something comes to mind later, but we always include it for transparency. Any questions related to November?
Questions?
No.
There be no questions. I will entertain a motion to approve the November financials for the Xterra Public Schools.
I motion to approve.
I second.
Move in second. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposes? Motion carried. Thank
Point
you.
of order, Ms. Newbern, are we recording you as an aye?
Yes, thank you.
Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Griffin. We'll move on with our governance portion. Presentation of the CAS SBAC data.
Thank you, yes. So today we're going to be talking about our California school dashboard data. This is related to last school year. It was just released, I believe, right before Thanksgiving break, so very recently. It was released publicly. It's something that we track throughout the year to make sure that when it's released the following year, we have an awareness of what the data will look like. So when we look at our school dashboard, this is our EPS1 dashboard overall. As you can see, there's been some positive shifts between last year and this year. When we look at it, we can see chronic absenteeism has been a positive shift that shifted from red to yellow. Our suspension rate is yellow as well. And our English language arts is orange. When we look at the data for these, we can see that chronic absenteeism declined by 5%. When we look at our suspension rate, it was maintained, but it was maintained at 2.8%. And then when we look at our ELA and math, right here, we can see that it was maintained for ELA. And for mathematics, it declined 6 points. And then for the LP progress, it was within 2%, so it's also considered maintained. And so when we look at this dashboard, we also like to look at subgroup data to see how our subgroups are performing. And we're going to look at graphs for all of this as well. But down here, we can click on different colors to be able to see which different subgroups and to see the change. And we can also click on the state button so that we can see how our students are performing in comparison to the state. So when we look at EPS2, similarly, we saw a lot of positive shifts. This is last year's, where you can see across the board, it was orange at the top and then yellow for mathematics. When we look this year, we can see chronic absenteeism is yellow, mathematics is yellow, suspension rate is blue, and ELA is also yellow. When we look at these specifically, we can see the change. So again, chronic absenteeism declined 5.6%. The suspension rate is blue since it was only 0.5% suspended. Yeah, so it really shows that the positive changes from our PBIS system and culture and climate. And when we look at our ELA and mathematics, you can see EPS2 in comparison to the state, our students overall are outperforming the state. They're closer to the standard than their peers. And we can click into here, we can see subgroups by color as well. But I'm going to go into more detailed charts for the subgroups. But for example, for English learners, we can see that our students are 41.9% points below standard versus the state, which is 93 points below standard, for example. So this is our California school dashboard. So as I dive into the graphs that I'm going to share, it's a lot of different graphs. So I wanted to provide some high level trends that you'll see throughout the presentation. So all EPS2 subgroups outperformed their peers statewide in ELA and math. So when we look at our individual subgroups at EPS2, so students who are Hispanic Latino, students who are English learners, students with disabilities, etc. Overall, they outperformed their peers across the board. EPS2 students overall, for the average, also outperformed the statewide average for students in mathematics. This is the same as the previous year, so that's 2 years in a row for EPS2. EPS2 also outperformed local public schools and 3 out of 4 local charter elementary schools when we look at our distance from standard. And students overall at EPS2 moved closer to the standard. At EPS1, students maintained an ELA, and English learners moved 8 points towards the standard in ELA. And at EPS1, ELs and students with disabilities moved 4 points closer to the standard in mathematics. And then areas for development, continuing to move closer to the standard at EPS2 because we want to make sure that our students are competitive statewide with their peers in more affluent communities, especially in ELA, so that they're not just competitive with students in similar subgroups, but competitive statewide. And then in EPS1, mathematics declined in 6 points. So here is our ELA distance from standard comparisons. So the way that this chart works is the 0 line is the minimum score to be considered proficient on the state assessment. And then they take the average scores for comparison by student score minus the minimum score to be proficient. And that shows how far above or below the average student is within the school. So anything above the line would be above the minimum proficiency, and if anything below the line would be approaching or does not meet. So when we think about the SBAC and expectations, that line is a minimum of 3, or upwards would be a 4 above, and then below would be like a 2 or a 1. So when we look at this overall, we can see that EPS2 in ELA is for the overall students is closer to that 0. So they're closer to grade level expectations than the vast majority of schools on this chart. For EPS1, we can see that they're similar to many different charters or middle schools within the area. So when we look at specific middle schools, we can see that EPS1 is in alignment with their results overall, except for one that was much closer to standard. And then when we look by subgroup, so this is our students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged. And this is just with our co-located sites. You can see, or neighborhood middle school, you can see how our students are performing in terms of the state, California, and co-located schools nearby in the community. And you can see for EPS2, it continues in ELA to be closer. Same with Hispanic and Latino. We can see that EPS2 is closer to the standard than the schools nearby, which is that last light green color. Sorry, I just realized that the EPS2 for some reason is showing up as red in the color code, but it's actually that bright green color. So same with here as well, we can see EPS2 is closer to the standard. And EPS1 is on par with schools nearby and our English learners. And then when we look at our student groups, this is our student groups within each school. So all students in the distance from standard students, the vast majority of our student population is eligible for socioeconomically disadvantaged and is also Hispanic Latino, which is why those scores look very similar between those three, because it's the vast majority of our students. And then you can see that our students with disabilities are showing in need of support in terms of growth towards standard, as there are the subgroups that's struggling the most in terms of reaching that grade level expectation. And then for mathematics, we can see here is our mathematics chart to be able to see how our students are performing in terms of mathematics. Yes.
Who's this other yellow school? That's also middle school, right?
Yes. Which one right here?
Yeah, so you see the schools on this chart that have middle school grade levels are further away, which is a statewide and even a national pattern. That middle school is generally farther from standard than high school or elementary students. Somewhat of a middle school phenomenon that everybody chases.
But presumably there are schools out there that are getting closer to the mean.
Generally in the more affluent neighborhoods.
And so here are our charts for mathematics and students that are socioeconomically disadvantaged, Hispanic, Latino. students with disabilities.
So I think what we see here is the trend is that EPS two is exceptionally competitive and outperforming our neighborhood schools for third through fifth graders. And then when we parse the EPS one data, and we separate the middle school data from the elementary data, they're also very competitive. But the EPS one data is not apples to apples for EPS two, since it is third through eighth grade, whereas EPS two is third through fifth grade.
And the cut score for proficiency increases each year by grade level.
Right.
So there's more of a possibility of a difference as you go up higher up within grade levels. And here's our mathematics student group comparison within all three schools, or within the three school sites, the two schools.
So does that mean that the proportion of overall schools that are further away from the average goes up as you get higher up in grade?
Yes,
grades
it becomes almost a compounding factor,
over time?
right?
And again, so this is just a recap, including the part one presentation that I did last year, because they provide different data points. So last meeting, we looked at growth data from NWA map, and this is distance from standard. So EPS one, with the data that I showed you last time, showed significant growth in NWA map data, but declined in distance from standard. So it's very interesting that there's those two different data points within the same student population. And then EPS two showed significant growth in math and increase in DFS distance from standard, and is outperforming all student groups and the state for distance from standard. And then ELA growth and achievement overall did not meet intended goals for last year, although EPS two subgroups did outperform their peer groups in the majority of local schools.
So I have a question. Since I've been here in the board, correct me if I'm wrong, I have always noticed that EPS two for whatever reason is slightly higher than EPS one. Now I know Mr. Katz said that you guys put the middle school and elementary together. But if me as a parent, if I want to look, let's say example for a school, and I see that, I'm not going to think middle school and elementary. Why can't we separate to see what's the difference between the elementary side? Because it's what is EPS two doing better that EPS one isn't? Or what's going on? I don't mean it like they're doing not the same thing, but something's happening, because I've been here almost 2 years and I still see the difference that nothing's changing in the sense where they're growing, but EPS two is always ahead. What's going on?
I mean, are they better? Like if you separated the 5, the 6 through 8? like,
Yes.
Is
I
that
would
population
know.
even better? Or is that just the middle
I
school?
think we
guys?
get a better reading on that to see what to pinpoint what's going on.
Yes, I can definitely, I have that information. I would need to look back at it because I did it in August, but I can definitely provide that to both of you so that you have it in terms of the separation between the grade levels. In terms of the academic performance differences, there's been a strong impetus at EPS one to really stabilize the culture and the climate and the behavior. And we've seen a lot of dramatic changes and improvements, including with attendance, which will lead to those academic positive shifts to be able to increase. And we've seen all of that happening. And so all of the indicators are showing that this is the direction we want to go in for EPS one. But yes, historically EPS 2's data has been slightly stronger than EPS 1's data.
And they've always had stronger attendance rates at EPS two. And we know there's a correlation between attendance. Because even at Reed Elementary, right, they had the lowest ADA year over year for several years in a row. So changing that culture of attendance is definitely going to give us a cascading effect. We can bring you that disaggregated data at our next meeting.
Thank you.
Great question.
Are there any other questions?
Great,
Okay, thank you. That concludes my portion of the presentation.
thank you, Ms. Moran. Any further questions for the administration? All right, we'll move into our next agenda item is consideration of resolution 12-2401 regarding sanctuary status for Xterra Public Schools. You should have that resolution draft in your packet, board members. And this is as a result of the 2024 presidential election. And I'll read the first whereas, and then the first resolve in this resolution. Whereas the 2024 presidential contest led to the election of the candidate whose previous administration created a brutal policy of immigrant family separation, which did irreparable harm to thousands of immigrant children and parents, and whose 2024 campaign promised to deport millions of immigrants currently living in the US. We've talked about this offline, and we know that a large portion of our community are immigrants. And so the resolve here that I'm asking for support on this resolution is that this board of directors that we reaffirm the policy that LUSD established in 2017. And there are two more resolves that will further support Xterra Public Schools becoming a sanctuary school district. And with that, I will move that the board will support this resolution, which authorizes the establishment of the Xterra Public Schools as a sanctuary school district. With that, I'll ask for a second. Motion has been second. Now we're open for further discussion regarding this resolution.
What are the procedural implications of that? Like, are there?
Yeah, absolutely. So with this resolution, it would affirm that no Xterra employee will share, discuss, or disclose home addresses, newcomer status, English learner status, country of origin on birth certificates, without the proper federally issued immigration warrant, specifically immigration warrant from an immigration judge. And that we will also provide training and support for families and students and employees for how to respond to inquiries or what to say. We actually had that first workshop yesterday with Elvis Cafe. And we have Catholic Charities doing one in January.
Is the language of this resolution the same as the one previously, or was there one? I thought there was one previously prior to me joining the board. Is it the same?
Not for Xterra, LUSD.
Oh, there was not. Okay,
Mhm.
got it.
Can I make a motion on it?
It's actually been moved and
Seconded, yes.
so it's just discussion phase now. Any further questions?
Sorry. Regarding this, first of all, teachers shouldn't disclose anything they're not allowed to from the get-go, but I know the school offers some knowledge to the parents and on the, Parent University and Platicas and whatnot. But I heard some, and I still was very skeptical. To me personally, I wouldn't want to be a great idea to maybe see if anyone professional can come and kind of give more details to parents that are nervous.
That's who came
Yesterday.
yesterday.
Oh,
Yeah, so
okay.
Eleanor Scafe came
Okay.
yesterday. They are also in partnership with LAUSD. And so those were immigration legal counsel that came
perfect.
yesterday and
Okay.
met with the parents for about 90 minutes.
Okay,
And then Catholic Charities is bringing their immigration legal team. And they'll also be providing hands-on workshops to help the parents fill out the forms and the paperwork, either for DACA extensions or to start citizenship paperwork. And we'll be hosting a workshop as well to provide templates, legal templates for families to prepare emergency custody documentation, because many of our families are mixed status families.
yes.
So if one or both parents are deported, they'll have emergency custody paperwork in order.
Mhm.
to assign custody to another American citizen, because the children in most cases are citizens and sometimes the parents are not.
Mhm.
So there is a concern about custody of their citizenships children if they are deported.
Mhm.
So we'll be providing those legal templates that can be filed as well. Yes, thank you.
Any further questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposes?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Bullock, members of the board, we are pleased to report our 23-24 CalSTAS findings for both EPS and EPS 2. And, you know, the headline is there were no findings. So that's the most important thing to share. If we look at the EPS 1 dashboard, we have reported vacancies from last school year for related to our very competent but long-term substitutes that we had in English and science last year. And the number reports as a 9 because remember in middle school, every period of the day reports individually. So Mr. Stanblue, you know, had 4 sections of English. Mr. Moreno had 4 sections of science, and then they had an affiliated section of PE. So, we did not have 9 teacher vacancies, to be clear, and those long-term subs were in position for some majority of the school year without turnover. At EPS 2, who again, being in elementary, does not have middle school reporting data, right? So they had no reported vacancies at EPS 2. And we did have a second semester long-term sub in place at EPS 2 last year, but this CalSTAS data pulls from norm day. So, you know, it would have been reasonable and fair to say that there was a similar long-term sub vacancy at EPS 2 last year. So this is a very effective CalSTAS report. Middle schools, especially across the state, continue to struggle with credentialed faculty, especially in science and or math. We do have a veteran, appropriately credentialed math teacher in our middle school, but science continues to elude us. We've been lucky to have our same beloved long-term sub in science, Mr. Moreno, back into that position. And his relationships with the students, classroom management, behavior management, are exceedingly effective. If I could pick a long-term sub out of the stratosphere of my life of experience and implore them to become a credentialed teacher, he would certainly be it. You know, but that young educator is still considering what his future pathway might look like, but he's doing great, and so we're happy to have him there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Kett. Any questions of Mr. Kett on the data? All right. Next is Ms. Moran.
Yes, so the SARC is due to be published by February 1st. And this is our last meeting before February 1st. So I want to make sure that you all have the opportunity to review and approve prior to that. One important piece though is that CDE is still publishing different data points within the SARC. So within the draft versions that are within the packet, I added notes on there that you can see where there is red. That is where CDE will be going through and adding in information. They're quite long, so I'm scrolling to one of the red ones to be able to show you. So right here, for example, CTE, so career technical education, will be completed by CDE. We don't actually have an option to save. And then as well as certain sections, for example, pupil engagement. So we have our narrative that we'll be adding there, but it won't allow us to save our narrative yet until CD finalizes the chronic absenteeism data and other data within there. So these are our draft school our SARCs, excuse me, school achievement report cards, that are school accountability report cards that are published annually. So this has all of the information in terms of credentialing, in terms of SBAC results, absenteeism, suspension rates. It's quite detailed. So this one, for example, for one school site is 47 pages. It also accounts for other staff that are hired to support in different ways. For example, the number of resource specialist teachers we have, school psychologists, our counselor to student ratios, etc. So this is EPS 2s right here. And then here is EPS 1s. The information is very similar to what we have already been presenting on throughout the board meetings this year and to date. So if there are any specific questions, I'm happy to answer any of them. But I don't want to dive too deep into it since it would be repetitive in terms of information we've already covered.
Any questions from the board?
No.
Now, this is an item for us to take action on, correct?
Correct. So we'd be looking for a motion to approve both SARCs pending those templated CDE items.
So I will entertain a motion to approve SARC for both schools pending the information as was noted during Ms. Haran's presentation.
I second.
So moved.
Oh, so moved.
Oh, I was gonna move, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, so, yes.
Great. Any questions? Discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is the consent agenda. Unless board member wants to pull one of those items to further discuss, I will entertain a motion to approve all three of the items that are included under the consent agenda.
I'd motion to approve the items under the consent agenda.
I second that.
Move in second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carried. Thank you. And the last item on our agenda is report from Mr. Ted on the advisory team reports as we discussed in our last board meeting. And I think most of those advisory team members or committees will be meeting this week.
Yes.
They haven't
correct.
already started.
Yes, this will be a very brief advisory team report, but hopefully a monthly standing item moving forward. So we have convened all three of the executive director advisory teams, including members of the board and district and school leadership. And everybody's inaugural meeting is on December 13th, where we'll be looking to task out some homework for everybody to work on. So that when we come back to the board in February, we'll have more robust reports from each of the advisory teams. Thank you so much.
Great.
Awesome.
I don't know what to do here. There being no further items on our agenda for today, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
Move in second, there is no debate on that. Meeting adjourned. Thank you and have a wonderful holiday season to everyone.
Merry Christmas, Jess.
Merry Christmas. Sorry I couldn't be there. Good to see you all.
The food's great. You're missing out.
I know, I'm so sad. But I'll see you guys soon in February.
Okay, great. We'll turn off the feed and then everybody can have round two.
Nicole, can you mark me as abstain for the consent? I was out of town. I didn't really get to look at that as much
Sure.
since it was already passed. Thanks.
Received. Thank you.
Okay, see you guys soon.